Well, I know from first-hand experience that not many of you who I've talked to expected Jeremy Corbyn to be leader of the Labour Party, and we're in good company because Jeremy Corbyn didn't expect that either. I spoke to him just as he got his name on the ballot paper. I said to Jeremy, well done. Somebody had to stand up for the left. He said to me, yes, it's great. It'll be over in a week. Well, as they say, a week's a long time in politics. Now, the task is, as I think everybody in this hall and millions of people in this country know now, that we have to defend what we and Jeremy Corbyn have created here. Because although it was a surprise to Jeremy and a surprise to most of us, it's one of those surprises that when you turn round and look back, you know exactly where it came from, even though it's a surprise. It came from a deep-seated feeling in this country that people are absolutely sick and tired of politicians who are in it for themselves. We're absolutely sick and tired of people whose greatest ideal is their own ambition, that they warmed to somebody who was in politics because the causes he was fighting for were bigger than his own ambition. That's where that mood came from. It came from a decade of work in the anti-war movement, more than a decade of work in the campaign for nuclear disarmament, of generations of work expressed through activists who fought the cuts, who are still fighting racism. Those movements poured in to the campaign for Jeremy Corbyn, and this was the result of those experiences, of all those people's work, and Jeremy Corbyn would be the first person to tell you that it was those movements, your activity, your actions, your defiance, your ability to keep fighting that have created that mood in this country today. But here's the thing. If that's where it came from, that's where it has to be defended. Jeremy Corbyn is not a spectator sport. Jeremy Corbyn is not about watching what MPs or shadow cabinet members do. It's about thinking, what am I going to do this week, this month, this year to make sure that the movements that created the mood that elected Jeremy Corbyn are strengthened, extended, and defended. Because that is what is really necessary if we're going to turn the tide of politics in this country. If we are going to beat the Tory government, if we're going to beat their plans for the NHS, if we're going to stop them starting more wars, that's the question that we have to focus on. And you know, I wouldn't get on a stage in Bristol without mentioning this city's most famous MP. Because Jeremy Corbyn and I worked very closely with Tony Benn, and if there was one thing I learned from working with Tony Benn, it is that a sense of your own movement's history is absolutely essential if you're going to do anything worthwhile today. He was a great believer that we should all know the tradition of the Levellers, of the Chartists, of the Tolpuddle Martyrs, of the suffragettes, because he knew that unless we understand what we're defending and what the sacrifices were of the people who put us where we are today, we couldn't possibly build on their achievements. And we have to think like that. We have to think that one of the Levellers, which Tony Benn was a great fan of the Levellers, he wrote about them and spoke about them, one of the Levellers said this. He said, nobody comes into the world with a saddle on his back, and no one is born booted and spurred to ride them. But you know what? The Tory government do believe that. They do believe that they are booted and spurred to ride us, that people like us who work for a living, who work by the sweat of our brows, will put them into office year after year, will provide the profits for their corporate friends, will provide the guns and armaments with which they fight their wars, and that we will never turn round to them and say, no, enough is enough. But people in this country have got to that point now. They understand that we cannot go on living like this. And what a miserable generation we would be if we could not defend the NHS, if we could not defend the welfare state, if we could not defend the trade union movement that our forefathers and foremothers built. It would be a miserable, contemptible generation if we were less than them. But I don't believe we are less than them. I believe that people understand that the project that Jeremy Corbyn was involved in, the project that we're all involved in, demands our action. It demands that we are on the CND demonstration. It demands that we are on the People's Assembly Against Austerity demonstration. It demands that we're on the anti-racist demonstration. It demands that we defend refugees. Because if we don't do that, then the haters and the kind of government that knows the price of everything but the value of absolutely nothing will ride roughshod over our lives and the lives of our children. You know, I was born I was born 20-odd miles from here. I was the first person in my family to be born into an NHS hospital. I was the first person in my family to come home to a publicly provided council house. I was the first person in my family to be cared for when I was ill by the National Health Service. I was the first person in my family ever to go to university, and it was paid for, grant and fees, out of general taxation. Now that's a society that we have lost. That is a society which we have lost far too much of. I thought that we were going to be the first lucky generation. I didn't understand that if the Tories get their way, I will be the last lucky generation. But it's not going to happen on my watch. It's not going to happen without a fight. It's not going to happen without a defence of the trade union movement, without a defence of the NHS, and without a campaign against the warmongers. Those are the tasks before us. We aren't in an audience like tonight on any other day of the week. It's not that we speak and you watch. You are the makers. You are the forgers of your own destiny. You must take the future of this society collectively into your own hands and turn its course away from the direction that this government has it going in. This year, and I'll end on this point, this year is the anniversary of the Easter Rising. And James Connolly, one of the great leaders of the Easter Rising, said this: "The only prophets are those who shape their own future. We cannot guess, and we should not try to guess, what will happen next. We must decide what we want to happen, organise and fight for it. Working people really only have two strengths in the end of the day. They don't have guns, and they don't have money, they don't have wealth, they don't have the ear of the media. They have their numbers and their organisation. But the truth of the matter is, even the numbers don't count without the organisation. So go out of here. If you're not in a union, join a union. If you're not in Stop the War, join Stop the War. If you're not in the People's Assembly, join the People's Assembly. Go back to your communities, to your trade unions, to your churches, to your mosques. Go back and tell everybody you know, the fight is on. The fight has begun. Join us and make sure we win it.